the analogy that I make is like we are like the Department of Transportation, right? We have all these cameras everywhere, and we have all these sensors, and we're tracking speed and flow, and the reason why I'm doing that is to know where the traffic is, where the red is on the map, and then try to resource that to make more lanes or bring in better infrastructure. I'm not I'm not the police.
Hello, and welcome to Hangar DX podcast. This is a podcast about developer experience and how engineering teams solve productivity challenges at scale. I'm your host, Ankit Chen, co founder of Aviator. At Aviator, we build developer productivity platforms inspired from some of these large companies. And today, my guest is Shahab Malik, joining us from JPMC. And I'm excited for this conversation because this is the first time we have a UX researcher working in DevEx join us. So we're going to definitely be diving into what does it mean doing UX research in the space and some of the learnings from it. But before that, Shahab, please introduce yourself for the audience.
Yeah, thanks, Ankit. My name is Shahab. I'm a UX researcher currently at JPMorgan Chase. I'm currently on a working on the platform engineering team in the DevEx space. So the way it works there is like you have a product operating model, and you have different agile teams. So I work with engineers, UX, and product management as the only UX researcher on my particular product. But we have a few UX researchers throughout the organization. So
That's
yeah, that's what I
amazing.
do now. And my background also is as a anthropologist. So I was an academic anthropologist before getting into UX research.
That's amazing. So, sounds like you have done UX research in different domains. Um, can you maybe share a little bit about like how is that might be different or similar to the research you do for developer experience, and
hmm
also generally kind of uh, most organizations we work with or we talk to in our community don't have UX researchers. They don't even have product managers, right? For the most
Yeah,
time, like generally
yeah.
platform engineering teams are run by just engineers. So share a little bit about what does it mean to be a UX researcher in this space.
Yeah, so I mean, UX research in general is the human component of experience. We talk about customer first, user centric. Um, so a lot of the large organizations, I know Google, Microsoft, Google kind of created this UX research role by hiring, or Meta even, right? They hire psychologists, sociologists, anthropologists to basically understand user behavior, right? Sometime, I worked for a medical device company, uh, making, your machine or your product more user friendly and engaging for all kinds of users, has a is a good thing that user experience researchers do, right? There's also some of the criticisms around increasing engagement on things that maybe we don't want to be increasing engagement on, right? Some of the apps that are out there that can be addictive and all that. So that's but we focus on user engagement. We try to work on products that help people, and I like the developer experience space now that I've found in the engineering platform because it's engineer focused. It's trying to make their lives better. They're trying to make their experience better. So I try to advocate not only for better engagement with tooling, but also the facilities, the environment, the culture of because we're humans after all, right? So when we talk about productivity, that also includes a lot of things around a person's life, right? You have to eat, you have to sleep, you have to code, you have other engagements, you have life aspirations, right? Um, so I try to really advocate for what does it mean to be working in this environment and to create value for the organization and for your customer.
Very interesting. So, coming back to like developer experience itself,
Mhm.
how important is it to have a engineering background or like developer background when you think about like working towards improving developer experience?
Yeah, no, that definitely helps a lot. I mean, I started out, first year I was doing computer science, so I've taken. Well, that's back in the day. It was like I took a course in COBOL. My first course was like Pascal and these your Fortran. I took a course in Fortran because when I was doing physics, this is in the physics department. They were giving us Fortran, then C.
Mhm.
And so I know, I know some coding, right now I can do some Python, but most user experience researchers and designers, because we were designers too, that design the interface, we work very closely with engineers to get the basic flow. It's like you have an idea what you're trying to design. So what we can at least do is like, okay, make sure that the user experience is streamlined, it's consistent, and that we can also test that with other engineers to either make improvements, validate, or make changes. Um, but we're always in conversation with engineers trying to get that understanding about what we're trying to achieve.
Interesting. Okay. So let's dive a little bit more into the role of a UX researcher in an organization, right? So we are a developer productivity platform. So we can possibly have like, our designers and UX researchers. What does it mean for an organization to have a UX research arm for developer experience? Is it primarily for the tools that the platform engineering team is building, or are you looking at like holistic developer experience across every tool or system that developers are touching? How does kind of like it works? Like what's the outcome from the research you do?
Yeah, well, I think there's two aspects. There's one is the outcome for sure, right? What the results are. The
Mhm,
other one is conducting appropriate research to get the kinds of information that we're looking for.
mhm.
So the user experience researcher is trained in getting those kinds of insights from people because we're looking for biases. We're looking for, because if an engineer does it, like, a lot of times they're focused on, their idea and their problem, and they have one of the toughest things is like there's stakeholders that have powerful ideas about what feature they want to develop, right? And they will be very successful and convincing others that that's the way to go, right? So our job is also to be skeptical and be critical of that and understand that, well, there's different mental models out there. We don't know how users are going to engage in it. And if I'm really committed to an idea and I can just get, confirmation from you, like, oh, is this good? Does this look good? Yeah, okay. And then you're just trying to check off that I talked to engineers. And am I really conducting research, or is this a marketing call, or am I convincing you of some idea? So we run surveys. We know how to design surveys to elicit the kinds of information we're looking for. And we conduct interviews in a way where, I'm really interested in your experience. I'm really interested in getting, there's no right or wrong answer here. There's, I'm looking for your idea, even though it conflicts with mine or our stated idea, right? So we put these things together from multiple users, from multiple angles, and then we bring the results back to product and engineering, and many times they do find it useful. Like I said, this is started by Google. If you know DORA, right, the DevOps Research and Assessment, it's those reports and the surveys that they send out, they have a mix of user experience researchers, UX researchers, and as well as engineers that conduct those surveys and gain those insights and make those reports. Um, so it's done in a very structured way. It's done in a very thoughtful way. I know there's some criticisms around Dora now, but but it's if you're looking at throughput, stability, the surveys are done right, and it's our one of our best approaches in understanding what the needs of users are and what getting to the best practices. So that's what a user experience researcher can do is to be able to bring at minimum that touch point between the user and the engineer. Like the engineer is also very busy, you know, creating products and doing things. So you have somebody that if you can resource it in your organization too, right? It requires large organizations with budgets that have product managers and UX designers and UX researchers. But that's the way that we feel the best products are built if you have the budget for it, right? What we call agile and then product operating model,
Hmm.
right? Like you're treating the platform as a product, and that product requires UX, design and research, and then engineering. And you're
Interesting.
always facing the customer. And so the UX and UX researcher is the one that is gaining insights from the user.
That's very cool. So You're already touching up on a little bit on this. I would love to hear kind of like different methodologies that you use. Like we already talked a little bit about, like, surveys, for instance. Is that something that you use commonly? That is like quantitative analysis, sort of like metrics, like system metrics. We talk about Dora. Dora research actually just came out very recently. So
Yeah. Mhm.
would love to hear kind of like, what type of different methodologies do you use? Do you interview users or like developers? Do you kind of like do surveys? How is it structured?
Yeah. So in our product teams right now, like there's certain standard things that are expected in UX research and design, right? So like we're when you're making a product, accessibility is one, like accessibility testing. There's certain check points that user experience has to go through. So usability testing, accessibility testing, those are kind of like things that just need to happen. Surveys quarterly or yearly. Um, but what I like to do also is like just constantly talk to developers, right? Constantly talk to our users. Set up some time in the week. Um, to at least talk to if there's nothing that I'm specifically looking for, but always having that communication open, finding their pain points, their problems, just being close to the user and the customer. I think that's bringing that approach is, I think, the most valuable thing, and then delivering that to the team.
Very interesting. How do you? So sounds like you rely very heavily on what I would call user interviews or like developer
Hmm.
interviews. How do
Yeah,
you find these developers? I mean, like JP Morgan is like, I'm guessing, thousands of developers. Like
yeah,
who
yeah.
who are like, is it like your special, like, fleet of developers you always like tap into, or is it sort of like, you just do like a random ordering of finding developers to?
I mean, most organizations like sometimes they have a list, right? There's already like a pre-approved list. You don't want to be targeting the same person over and over again. um, like this guy's bothering me again like every week every day. um, but what I do, like like I said, we have Adobe Analytics, so we see the users of our product, right? And so then I try to find active users, and then by location, right? Also like try to, because at JPMC we have there's 70,000 technologists. I think most people don't realize how large of an organization,
That's crazy.
engineering organization this is, right? And we're all over the world, right? US, India, Singapore. It's 24 hours. There's coding happening 24 hours. No matter what time I get on, you know, there's somebody doing something, right? Um, and so what I want is I want diversity in terms of like our location, because different places, different cultures, they have different approaches, and then we have different lines of business. Like Chase is your retail location, but then there's like the trading platform in Wall Street. There's independent bank businesses in the UK and in India. There's asset and wealth management. And this is important to realize the location, because the regulatory environment is different in the US, UK, and India, right? We have to follow the national laws, and also there's a data collection restrictions as well in terms of what you can collect and use. So,
Interesting. Even on your own employees.
oh yes, yeah, oh yeah, for sure. Like in the European Union, like you can't collect like certain kinds of employee data. Like I can't like look at all your hours that you worked.
I see.
Like, yeah, Europe is very protective of their employees in that way. So there's a lot of like HR laws, and so like you can't even dashboard certain things. Like they'll just say no, that's not legal there, but it'd be legal in the U.S. or India for that matter.
Interesting. So I want to like maybe change gears a little bit. I know we were also jamming on the impact of measuring different metrics, right? Like we already talked a little bit about like Dura metrics. There is also the whole space framework. There's thousands of
Hmm.
metrics out there. At least there's hundreds of companies or like tools that are available to measure productivity or developer experience, or like in
Hmm.
different shapes and forms. So do you have any thoughts on kind of like using any of those tools? Like how do you analyze the data? How do you, at what granularity are we sharing and measuring this data, and how is it effectively used?
Right now on the like on an internal developer developer platform, right? The first thing was Dora metrics, right? Let's build a Dora metrics because everybody's building Dora metrics. Let's build Dora metrics. So I think that was a good approach too, because it's they've done their research and like it may be a little dated now because right now everybody's like the last door report, 90% of companies have engineering platforms. And so what does that mean? That means you have a modern DevOps environment, cloud infrastructure. You're doing, your throughput and stability is what Dora was measuring before. Because if you go back 10 years, not everybody was doing like daily deployments, or weekly, right? They were doing quarterly, right? And they weren't have there was no cloud infrastructure like there is today, or people weren't convinced that they wanted to go to cloud. Cloud was a new thing, right? You had internal servers and you had your large merges and um, it took a while for like, the Dora came out saying, hey, listen, this is the best way for you guys, for people to develop software for the best organizational value is to increase your throughput, smaller code sizes, incremental changes. And what you're going to get is two things. You're going to get higher velocity or throughput through the system, better software, and it's more stable, right? So that's what Dora pretty much measures, right? Your throughput and stability, things like change lead time and mean time to recovery, right? Those are like kind of like your bread and butter of DevOps environment. So what happens if you're already there? You're already like, okay, you've already developed all these technical capabilities. Your Dora metrics are good. Um, but actually, in a large organization, there's places you can see that they're not doing those kinds of things. Um, we're still moving certain lines of businesses, certain parts onto the cloud still, right? So we know, we try to find these pain. So what the metrics do, these large metrics, is help us find these like bottlenecks, pain points where we can put some attention to and find some resourcing and solution to their problems. We use a lot of external tools. There's a lot of internal tools. Like I said, we have different lines of businesses that do operate as different organizations, especially like say we're like a platform team. In a Our customers are JPMC engineers. They're really our customers. They can choose to use the product or not. Because if you're like sitting at Wall Street and your line of business is bringing in billions of dollars a year, you don't have to listen to me, right? You don't have to take my call. You don't have to take our platform. Only if it's engaging. They may be using their other internal tools or vendor tools to develop their software. Um, and we have so many different telemetry and observability and metrics already dashboarded in various parts of the business. So really, it's like, how do we curate for the platform?
Hmm.
Right now, it's not like the problem isn't, what can we bring in, or what tooling do we need to build or get to build this. It's more like, out of all these, like we have like 1,000 different kinds of metrics, which ones do you curate to and so that gets me to like, because when you talk to certain stakeholders, certain managers, they want to see things like, oh, how many hours did my developer work, how many commits did they make. Those are some of them. When you say productivity, um, and this is a cultural thing. This is a thing within large organizations, managers who, when they hear productivity, they want to know, are my developers working hard enough, right? Are they busy? Are they doing busy? Are they staying busy? Whereas, I'm trying to advocate for the best practices, what the best organizations are doing, what the best research shows, is that, and like Dora, right? As a starting point, it's focused not on the individual, it's focused on the engineering environment, the DevOps environment, right? Making the tooling fast, right? So like when you have an idea and you sit down and code, if it's in development, if it's in production by tomorrow or the next day, that's a good developer experience for the majority of developers, right? And in an environment, in a culture that is positive, right? If you start looking at like, okay, well, I want to choose these metrics, tracking time and working on weekends, or how many commits do they make, and we've had these conversations with certain stakeholders. They really wanted to show these in the dashboard. But some of the stuff, like I said, you can't do in the European Union. So if you're a developer in Germany, they ran into that law, like, oh, you can't show those things. But there's developers from other places who have a approach that I call a more disciplinary approach,
Hmm.
right? So what I'm on right now is like, okay, making sure we're curating the right metrics that's focused on engineering performance, systems performance, right, in a generative culture. That's what I'm trying to bring to the table and trying to advocate for, mostly, right? Because like the metrics are there. We have a lot of metrics. We show top line metrics for systems performance, throughput, and stability. Um, there's some other stuff too, like how fast it takes for a review to happen, those
Hmm.
bottlenecks. What you really want to do, like what really want to focus really not is on like the particular metric, but what are the bottlenecks that your organization is facing? And do you have the right sensors to be able to to find those bottlenecks, right? So you can
Interesting.
build those sensors like, change lead time, throughput, stability metrics, diffs per day, diffs per hour, diffs per, it goes on and on and on and on and on and on, right? Like you have these like, okay, what am I supposed to do with all this? It can be all overwhelming. But if you're really thinking, okay, what are the bottlenecks? You know, the analogy that I make is like we are like the Department of Transportation, right? We have all these cameras everywhere, and we have all these sensors, and we're tracking speed and flow, and the reason why I'm doing that is to know where the traffic is, where the red is on the map, and then try to resource that to make more lanes or bring in better infrastructure. I'm not I'm not the police, right? Like there's the same cameras, the same the same data can be used for a punitive approach, focused on the individual. Oh, that guy's going too fast. That guy's going too slow. That guy's not moving at all, right? Let's go give him a ticket, right? Or let's go discipline and punish him, right? So that's really the approach the mentality that I'm trying to get our stakeholders and our developers. Because when I say the developers love it, right? Developers are like, yes, yes, go do that, right? Go do that. Advocate for that, right? But for our managers, yeah, it's really getting them to understand, like, it's not another day. It's not productive to focus on an individual. Like, let that, you know, you need to, as a manager, know that does your developer provide value to the organization? Is he providing value to you and your team? You know, um, that's the metrics really won't show you that because the teams go up and down too. Like, if you're on a big project and you have a great roadmap and you have good user feedback loops, like you can be very quick in terms of have getting from idea to production, but only if your environment is fast,
Hmm.
right? And but if maybe the product team that you're on has run out of steam, right? It needs to be reallocated to other teams. Like that's fine, but the metrics it'll come out in the metrics. There'll be less commits. There'll be less, deployments. But it's like, okay, is the question shouldn't be you don't know the reason why that happened, right? So we take a blameless approach. Take a blameless approach and just look at like from a top line, like what is going on. You don't know the why. It could be that somebody's slacking off, but that's a management issue. We have Jiras for that. We have HR for that. We have managers and quarterly reviews for that, right? That's what that's what we do. That's what Google does, right? You have those quarterly reviews to have that human interaction to know if somebody's doing a good job or not. But we're talking about value. Metrics, from a top line, because we have 70,000 engineers, really just show us like, where we can fix the bottlenecks, where we can make the car go faster,
Hmm.
right? Or that the other analogy I use is like, we're using these metrics to make the car go faster, like on a F1 team. You watch F1,
Yep.
so McLaren makes this dashboard. They have there's public telemetry that's coming out of the car. Public, anyone can go and see any driver and how hard they braked on turn one, then when they hit the throttle, then where the steering position is. It's pretty crazy to see those telemetry metrics, right? But their assumption is a driver wants to go fast. Their assumption isn't, and they treat them like rock stars and they pay them like rock stars, right? Their focus is how do we make our car go faster?
Right.
right? And so I think that's kind of like the approach. We got our headphones here. We look like we could be in the back of a pit, you know. But there's like tons of that telemetry data, large teams, billion-dollar teams, right? Focus on making cars go faster with the assumption that developers do want to go, not develop, drivers do want to go fast,
Hmm.
right?
Yes.
Versus like if you're driving for a delivery company, right? There's certain delivery, I'm not going to name names, but if, like there's pressure on delivery drivers in certain companies, right? And I've seen their dashboards, same metrics, speed, braking, steering, right? They're collecting all these metrics, but their goals are different, right? It's like how many stops are you making? Are you making your stops fast enough? How many packages are being delivered? It's not focused on the driver. It's focused on the customer who's buying packages, right?
Hmm.
And it's a very disciplinary approach, right? And if you look at like their job satisfaction, it's low, right? Very high stress. They're having to use the bathroom in random places. Sometimes they can't use the restroom because they're on the
Clock.
disciplinary approach.
Hmm. Yeah. Wow. I love some of these analogies. Like, I think definitely like the traffic one was interesting. I can see kind of like how that can be applied. Um, maybe so. Okay, we've done like some of these conversations on the surveys and sort of like metrics as well. One thing which I think is also somewhat what you're alluding to is there are system metrics and then there are individual metrics. And your point
Mhm,
is like, let's find and identify system metrics or bottlenecks in the workflows
mhm.
through kind of like looking at averages and overall flow of work versus looking at individual metrics, which is around how do we see whether an individual is productive or not, right? And that's kind of like
Yeah.
the differentiation you're making. um,
Mhm.
I do notice definitely this is a topic of contention in many for many managers. How have you been able to communicate and in some ways convince leadership about the two different approaches and how to think about developer experience and productivity in uh, in a way which actually helps improve collective tooling and performance?
Yeah. So within the organization, I've made this presentation. I've given these analogies. I try to tell it to whoever I can because something I think the developers like it. They can point to research, right? Um, so I think telling the story, right, of a productive developer versus unproductive developer, focusing on the systems, I think that makes sense to most people once they it's hard to argue against because the research shows it. If you look at Dora, Space, Flow, Core 4, right, they're always talking about um, developer experience. Like they're not even talking about developer productivity anymore. We're talking about developer experience, right? But the developer productivity creeps up in there in this disciplinary approach. And what I do is I just try to communicate this as much as possible, right? Like this story, right? These analogies. That's why I'm trying out these analogies like the dashboards, F1, being Caltrans, which is a Department of Transportation, looking at flow, right? So that makes sense on an engineering platform team. Like that's what they're trying to do, right? If you're trying to 10x productivity, right? Like that's the buzzword out there. Engineering platforms will 10x, 100x, right? It's like, yeah, it can, right? Like it really can if you focus on the tools and the systems, right? Because the analogy is like, okay, if you're walking, and I have a stick in my hand, right? And I go, no, you're walking, you need to run, right? So I can get you maybe from 5 miles an hour to like 15, and then you can only like maintain that for so long, right? Wouldn't it be better for me just to buy you a moped, right? Or a car, right? What about an airplane? What about a rocket ship, right? Like you're never going to get to Mars trying to whip somebody to run faster, right? You have to provide a rocket, right? And that literally is 1,000x. So the platform can be that rocket, right? We're not worrying about, how fast somebody can run, right? We're assuming if they're in the rocket that they're going to be going fast, right? Um, and then take a little step back because if you're overly focused as a manager, I think there's like becomes like a corporate cultural thing, right? Corporate 9 to 5. We're going to monitor you. You're sitting in your desk, back to office mandates, work requirements, right? Like there's reasons for that, right? That's fine to, are people working? Let managers deal with that, HR deal with that. But what we want to do now for developers, with AI and more leveraging, it's like most developers want to make good products. They want to have an attachment to their products. They want to change the world in some way, right? If you think about that young engineer, the young idealistic, you want to solve world problems, like through coding, right? Um, or now, you get into an environment, you go, okay, what's the next unicorn going to be, right? Like that $1 billion thing that I can be a part of. Uh, you want developers really to be in that space, have time to think about value, creating good ideas, right? And as a researcher, I love talking to developers because they have all these wonderful ideas, right? And but if you're caught in an environment where your only focus is on your commits and how long you're sitting at your desk and going through Jira tickets, well, that's of limited value for the future, I believe, right? Like those things need to be done. They can be done. They're tracked through Jira and HR, but how do you really track value? How do you
Mm,
track, bringing great ideas? Those those things only get captured in like a market valuation later on. So creating that space for like Google had that right approach in the beginning. Like 20% of your time was supposed to be dedicated towards. That's like one day out of the week to do whatever you want, right? So like I think in the early days, if you got to Google, you were on that F1 racing team, right? Like you're that driver, you put on that hat, I'm a Googler now, and it's a rock star, right? Like you have a great environment, everybody's focused on building great tooling, and when you sit and you type and you code, it's in development the next day. Um, you have food and you have work life, well, not necessarily work life balance, but all, everything's taken care of for you,
right.
right? Um, but not all teams are F1 teams, right? Some teams are go-kart teams or uh, GT3 teams or whatever.
Mhm. Um, so I know we are coming close to time, but I definitely want to ask one question which is on top of everyone's minds, which is AI. Um, can you share like some of your thought process in terms of like how are you incorporating the advancements of AI for evolving your UX research, like in terms of like how do we use AI, how do we enable developers to use AI better, more effectively, and how do you kind of like maybe even measure the value of AI in the entire developer experience?
Just talking to developers and their usage of AI and their impression of it. I think there's a lot of conversation. Is it increasing productivity, right? I think there's a lot of opportunity in the automation space, right? Some of the code review, scanning, fixing bugs, refactoring, right? A lot of that stuff is already happening. Um, at JPMorgan, we have our internal LLMs, right? Because of sensitivity of the data, we don't we're not trying to train outside models, right? And so there's stuff for internal usage, and then for coding, they've been able to turn on some outside vendors. So developers are still in the driver's seat. I think right now, giving developers that option to uh, have code generated by AI, and then having the choice to use it or not use it. And then you can track if they are using it or not, right? Copilot, for example, already does that for you, right? So the IDE environments and AI environments, they track those kinds of things. So we are looking at those things. We are tracking those things. Everybody's on AI. There was a talk given at the Developer Productivity Engineering Summit. JP Morgan did a presentation, so I
Oh,
can I
okay.
can say those things, right, that they already presented on. But really, they're trying to make the tooling faster. more effective using LLMs in these areas that I just mentioned.
So one thing which I would love to at least just double click on, probably like as a last question, which is even the current latest Dora report talks about this, where the sentiment of use of AI by developers in terms of how much productive it makes them is different than the reality. There was also a talk about that at like by Meta recently, even at DP Summit, about the same concept, which is like, okay, we probably get about 10-15% of gains with AI, and people have like many different metrics around how we anticipate and see the impact of returns from AI in developer productivity. Do you have any thoughts, kind of like coming from UX research background and looking at it from that lens, in terms of the difference between perception and reality for AI?
Yeah, I think like I said, we're a large organization with different lines of business in different areas. So, you know, it's particular to their environment as well, like their adoption and usage. And so there are some teams that are like right on the cusp of some of these things, right? And so there's faster adoption and also like an interest, a curiosity, even a hunger to be on top of it, right? And then, like, do you have some old school teams that are comfortable in their environments, comfortable in their ways of working, and the AI may not be doing certain things that they need, or it may require too much rework, or based on their own impression. So I think it's a little too early to tell. I don't have the data either internally, but yeah, I think you can see it from both ways. It's enough of a population size that you're gonna have like those who love it and also those who hate it, right?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah,
I mean, we are definitely living in very interesting times. This is the first time I feel like since the Agile Manifesto came in, then we are actually rethinking software engineering, and times are interesting. I think the next few years will be very interesting to see how it evolves.
yeah.
Um, I mean, I'm sure we can talk on for ages on this, but like, unfortunately, we are out of time. So, with that, let's wrap up. Shahab, thank you so much for all the amazing insights and analogies that you shared about developer experience, bringing in some of the very interesting perspective on user experience from a UX lens. Um, I'm sure we can do this conversation in a few months and see kind of like how it has evolved. And for thank you all for listening. If you're interested to learn more about developer experience or have interest working in DevOps platform teams, join our community Hangar DX. It's dx.community. You can find more information there. We run podcasts, virtual series, and some in-person events. And again, thank you, Shahab, so much for your time. And until next time, have a great day.
Thank you, Ankit. I really enjoyed it.